So good morning and welcome to the new era of agriculture commodity trade. Welcome to the session 1, day 2 of Commodity Week World 2026 or CWW 26. Let me just do a little visual and mic check. Neeraj, am I audible and visible?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Thank you. So Neeraj is my colleague. He is CEO of HnyB and one of pillar behind stitching this beautiful marathon global event called Commodity Week World 2026. Thanks a lot, Neeraj. So yesterday we opened this global marathon by dissecting the massive demand crucible of maize complex across 3 global theaters. Now, as we begin day 2, we are turning our focus to absolute foundation of human caloric survival. We have declared that the agriculture value chain has crossed a critical threshold. Our traditional playbooks, the one that relies on predictable crop cycles, stable freight corridors, and reliable trade alliances, have officially expired. We are no longer observing the cyclical market corrections. We are operating within a baseline of permanent structural volatility. Over the next 5 days, we are continuing to bring the global boardroom directly to your screens. CWW26, organized by HnyB and Know Your Commodity, is presented by AgriGuru Online and is supported by our partners Kripco Agri, Bajrang Group International, Bignani Group, also with our association partners like OATA Myanmar, Ukraine Pulses and Soybean Association, and GOPKI Indonesia. Other institutional partners like Solidaridad and World Cooperation Economic Forum has also helped us. CWW26 is moving entirely beyond the delayed data of historical balance sheets and presentation. This is an unscripted, unfiltered war room. Why war room? Because we are seeing from climate to crisis, the world is having a lot of challenges. We are here to democratize the high-stake market intelligence, mitigate the systemic risk of information asymmetry, and equip you with foresight needed to defend your margins and ensure equity for producers and consumers both. We open today with the most vital, politically sensitive, and foundational agriculture commodity on the planet. Welcome to the wheat complex. As a reminder, our session is beamed live across multiple digital assets on multiple LinkedIn handles, YouTube handles, Twitter or X handles, Facebook, and our event website. You can find the links in the comments. Now let's look at a macro view. While the maize is a roaring engine of animal feed and food and fuel, oilseed dictates energy transition, pulses ensure nutritional security, wheat is the baseline of global food security. It is the ultimate geopolitical commodity where a single export restriction or drought can trigger food inflation across continents. Globally, the wheat balance sheet is tightening. If you look at some of the institutional figures, they confirm that precarious shift in the market. The baseline numbers of global wheat production for 26-27 marketing year is forecasted between 815 to 821 million metric tons. That represents a sizable drop of 23 to 28 million metric tons compared to the current season, that is 25-26. However, the global consumption is outpacing the output with global wheat consumption upward of 825 million tons. This dynamic is leading to reduced trade and decreased ending stock compared to 25-26 marketing year. The forecasted carryover wheat stock tightening to roughly 284 million metric tons, one of the lowest in a decade. A significant portion of the lower production is across the major wheat exporting countries, with the United States, European Union, Argentina, and Australia accounting for largest reductions. Out of the top 7 largest exporters, we have found that the overall export availability would be reduced by more than 20%. The market is actively pricing these persistent environmental challenges, including ongoing drought, leaving a clear mark on the US balance sheet, while high input cost and weather leading to Australia reducing the sowing itself. But to truly understand where the global wheat market is heading, we must focus on the epicenter of demand and the largest producing nations on the earth, which bring us directly to our first panel of the day, the Asia and Pacific theater. Massive harvest and critical coverage. Here in Asia Pacific region, wheat is a key staple crop. In India, it is more revered because substantial portion of India, more than 60% of India, is having wheat, not rice, as its staple food. The region also houses 2 of the largest wheat producers, which is China and India, and they also happen to be the largest consumers. Let's break down unpack pressure points a little bit. India, we had a bumper harvest as per the official numbers of 120 million metric tons, while we believe it is close to 107 million metric tons in reality. However, a bad monsoon leading to low soil moisture and lack of reservoir availability during Rabi could result in lower than record plantings, which we have seen in previous year of close to 33.5 million hectares. On yield side also, the 3.6 tons per hectare, which is again an official number, was seen last year, could substantially get reduced because of lack of availability of fertilizers, lack of moisture, and other weather-related challenges. This back-to-back bumper harvest has resulted government having a war chest. As we talk today, close to 51 million metric tons is lying with the government. For the global market, the critical indicator is export potential. Beginning in 2026, the government of India allowed export of wheat and wheat product, and we might see a quota which might not get exhausted, but the quota stands at 5 million metric ton. Well, let's talk about Chinese consumption. Chinese has always been a gray area. We are seeing that while the China, there is an aggressive push for domestic yields and increasing productivity. Still, whenever China enters the market, it have a massive role in it. When it comes for buying, the whole of the world's producers take a notice of that. And we also see US-China getting into some sort of trade treaty where $17 billion worth of imports are going to happen to China from US, and wheat can play a substantial role there as well. Now, coming to other economies in Southeast Asia, Indonesia. Indonesia is competing heavily with Egypt when it comes to taking the prime spot on the top of the importers of wheat in the world. Philippines, Vietnam, all are these nations, they are dependent heavily on imports. But the million-dollar question is that at what price point? Because again, as in these countries, rice is a staple crop, not the wheat. They can live without wheat. So the price points and other factors of availability will play a very important role. They might look towards Australia, they might look towards America, they might look towards Argentina, and if Indian parity matches, they might even look towards India. So now the days of relying on lagging monthly report to make multi-million dollar procurement decision are over. Navigating this extreme volatility requires elite ground level foresight. And to achieve that, we are having an exceptional panel of wheat expert today. We'll be talking about Asia Pacific and markets here. And we have commercial leaders who are forced to execute large-scale procurement amid these chaos. And that makes them superstars. So with that, the mandate is very simple. We would like to give pure intelligence. So welcome to day 2 of Commodity Week World 2026. That's officially open, the Wheat Asia and Pacific War Room. My first speaker, I would like to welcome Garima ji. So Garima Jain is a dynamic agribusiness leader, currently serving as CEO of Agribusiness for Top Commodities India. She specializes in high volume commodity procurement, international trade execution, and building fully transparent ethical supply chain for grains and oilseed sector. Her expertise lies in navigating acute market volatility, maritime logistics, and driving corporate expansion through strategic asset investment and institutional partnership across global agriculture trading network. One of a renowned name in the sector. Welcome, Garima ji. It is a pleasure to have you on this session now.
Thank you, Deepak ji. Thank you for setting the context for the wonderful introduction.
Ma'am, can you start? Okay, your
Yes,
video is on now.
it's right.
Yeah, perfect.
Deepak ji, you have touched based on a very important aspect of life. Wheat is, or bread is the essential of human being. It is a benchmark. It has created us. So we cannot take away its importance from our lives. And more so from India perspective, we have seen a different kind of a journey in India. So my opening thoughts are that this is a discussion which has started from ancient times. In our ancient times, wheat has been termed as Jivan, which is life-giving. Wheat has been termed as Balya, which is strength improving. So you have touched upon an extremely important aspect, and happy to dive into the details for this year.
Awesome. So let me get you to the first question. How do you see the emerging global and domestic wheat balance sheet unfolding and the possibility of wheat export from India? Because whenever into international forums, we see that the people talk about, is India a trusted exporter? Can we rely on India? That's a multi-million or multi-trillion dollar question, right? Your initial comments and overview on that, ma'am.
So the global landscape is changing, needless to say. Like we mentioned, wheat is one of the starting points. And we have seen in history that a lot of wars, a lot of conflicts For them, bread is the starting point. So we have seen Arab Spring, we have seen USSR decline in ancient history. We have seen great empires like Rome fall, and food or bread or wheat became the starting point. So from that, why go far? Let's look into the last 10 years. We have seen multiple conflicts or changes in the geopolitical landscape. So, for example, the Black Sea situation, the Ukraine situation, 2014. Then we saw the COVID shock in 2019. 2022, again, a Russia-Ukraine conflict leading to a lot of changes in the global market, unforeseen. And why go far? Recently, we have seen the Iran conflict. So in this entire context, wheat has reacted in all these situations in a different manner. So the global wheat production, like you mentioned, is close to 800. It varies between 825 to 850 million tons. And the global export, wheat export, primarily amongst Canada, Australia, US, Black Sea, is about today about 225 odd million tons. So the big news as we read this morning also is about Australia. Australia, as we call it, as a swing supplier. So this year, Australia is looking at a production risk. Last year, Australia had a bountiful crop. In the current year, the current harvest, which is going to come in November, ABARES has given wheat production in Australia as 26.5 million tons, and Rabobank has given Australia production at about 25 million tons. So we are looking at a dent of 10 million tons in Australia. Add to it, there is a weather risk. Add to it, there is an input risk this year. All in all, it means that farmer of Australia is very defensive. Australia is a key supplier to the Asian markets. With a dent of 10 million tons of production, the supply chains will have to shift. And therefore, Australia will continue to become a swing supplier. The second point, if we consider Australia, is that although it has a very good infrastructure for wheat export, the port congestion usually is something that has to be managed in Australia. So from that standpoint, I think equation is changing in looking at Australia is a key supplier. You touched upon the consuming countries in Southeast Asia, for example, Indonesia, for an example. From a consumption country standpoint, like Egypt, like Indonesia, like Southeast Asia, these are big consumers, even China. So for them, how it is changing is that these countries have to look at multiple origins now. Gone are the days wherein you would rely on only one origin for your supplies. So, for example, in all these big consumer countries, they have to manage their supply chain and in current times, balance their supply chain in a manner that they have consistent supplies continuously. I remember in 2016 when India was importing wheat and I was participating in the trade flow, there was a lot of discussion with the millers in India on although we are importing, but how much we can blend. So for consumer countries, there is a price risk, supply chain risk, and a quality risk. When we are shifting origins, we also have to get into a discussion on how the milling blends can change to suit the eating habits of that country. So if Russia or Ukraine is a different color of wheat, maybe a red wheat, and for example, Hungary is called as a white wheat. Australia also falls into the same category. So for the consumption countries this year, all these risks have to be managed: price risk, supply chain risk, and quality risk. And they have to plan all of it better from a standpoint that we are seeing a lot of changes in supply chain, prices of fertilizer, input risks, and weather risk on top of it. Then nearby countries, including, for example, in Global South, if we look at Pakistan, the situation is volatile in Pakistan. Pakistan often comes at a point and at an inflection point of export ambition, import dependence, and government procurement there. So this year there was rains during the harvest. Their qualities have been impacted. Um, there is an estimate that Pakistan will need to get into import this year. So, however, that situation is going to evolve only close to October or November. So, whether Pakistan imports or not, moving towards that, that could be a play of only 2 to 3 million tons. Pakistan produces about 25, 27 million tons. Coming to the big boy in the wheat market, China is always, what do you say, the bull in the glass house, big consumer, big producer, big mover. So this year we are yet to see any kind of weather concerns. As we see, China is focusing more on beans and corn. But if it comes to wheat, I think the situation will evolve as to how much China will be importing. We have to see China not from perspective of only consumption, but from a perspective of food security. So China has been very careful to manage their food securities in form of wheat, and they have one of the largest inventories of wheat as we know or hear. Coming to India, you touched upon Indian wheat export this year. So again, we have India as a country also has to learn and navigate, because for us, it is not about production, not about consumption, but wheat is food security. I think government has done a fantastic job over the last few years to manage food security as well. We sit at a very comfortable stock levels today. And at the same time, Indian farmers have been extremely supportive. They have moved the country from food deficit years to food secure and food self-sufficient years. So that's a commendable job there. Coming to your point on whether India is going to export from a quota of 5 million tons, so far India is out of parity. Black sea wheats into Southeast Asia is close to today about 280 CNF. And India's FOB levels are only around 275, closer to those levels. So for India, currently we're out of export, but Bangladesh is a possibility if you're able to export through the land borders.
Excellent intervention and very well summarized the global scenario and Asian scenario. Thank you. That's expertise I always admire about you, right? In very simple terms. Now, actually, when we talk about the geopolitics happening around us, right, that gives panic to all the traders because, like, wheat is a commodity which is impacted by anything and everything, right? Some even a butterfly, like, flips the wing somewhere in Pacific, right? It impacts the prices even in India, which so far has been typically like shielded, as you rightly said, by the government, wheat being a very important commodity. How do traders in such a volatile market take positions? Because it becomes very difficult. Morning, you start at USD to INR equation of 95.26. By 4 p.m., it is 96.8. So these challenges, how do you see when we look at export part of it? How do a trader trade in such a volatile environment?
Yeah, fantastic question. And we will segregate this question into two parts. One is the global market. And in today's APAC wheat market, the greatest risk is not just the price alone, volatility alone, but it is the interaction of price, freight, fertilizer, currency, geopolitics, and policy interventions if we look at India. So therefore, for any global trader today, it is not just about only looking at futures, but effective hedging would mean protecting supply chain and margins. So most critical, there are certain factors which are out of your control. For example, if we look at today's oil markets projected to be $120, it means that even though your origin supplies are secure, even then the freight cost and logistics costs have to be managed well. So I think in today's world, it's not only about hedging with futures, but looking at all these risks in totality and then planning your hedging strategies accordingly. And number two factor is that a lot of times, when traders are trading, it is also a lot about quality. So, from that standpoint, if we look at certain origin geographies, for example, let's say South America. So South America became very big to global soybean market, not only in terms of supplies, but in terms of managing the logistics. Therefore, we have to focus as traders on all these origin countries in aspect of freight, logistics, quality, prices, and the consumption countries have to manage it properly. Number two is we will see increased protectionism. Wheat is going to be a factor of food security more than just a price. And therefore, when you enter into a regionalistic view, when you become very protective of your food security, in such cases, I think this is very inflationary and causes price impacts, leads to more stocking, higher stock levels in certain geographies. So from that standpoint, I see for traders, it is more volatile, more opportunity, but only if you're able to manage your risks pretty well.
Perfect, very well articulate. Now, coming to the last question, in case India has to really do something about the export of it, 51 million metric tons of wheat, and that challenges of storing wheat for a long time, it's neither advisable, neither it is wise, right? So we would be having last year of product of close to 17, 18 million metric ton, even if we take care of some of PDS or other government scheme disbursements. How do you see government can support export? Do you think only giving cheap wheat from their quota is the only option? And then there are also challenges about the new procurement on the quality aspect. So on these 2 points, how do you see things?
So number one, let's look at the numbers in terms of how much the government has, because primarily for India, it becomes very important since we have a large stockholding program by the government, and FCI procurement and PDS distribution becomes very large factors. So number one point is that government started at very comfortable level, around 22 million tons. And so we have this year additional 10 million tons as a starting point. In terms of procurement, the government has bought so far 5 million tons additional from last year, being supported by MP. So all in all, for 2026, we are looking at an additional 15 million tons of inventory for us. So is it good and comfortable? 100%. Looking at today's geopolitical situation and food security of India, we are in extremely good position, and I think government has done extremely well here to manage. If you look into history, there are lots of countries in the world that have gone through revolutions and upsprings, but India has been secluded from all of that because government has very well managed the food security so far. So now with this additional 15 million tons that has to go out, last year PDS distribution, everything put together, was all in all about 19 million tons. When government procures more, it also creates a gap in the local market, which is why we do see some price rises in the local market, and therefore also millers need to have their supply chains secure. So with this additional 15 million tons, what government will need to do is focus a lot into PDS, focus a lot into OMSS, securing supply chains for the industrial, for the consumption, for the milling industry. And number three is export. So you touched upon export. Coming to quality part, no doubt our qualities were impacted. But like I always feel, at a price point, every commodity has a demand. So we should be able to manage that. All the quality concerns are there, but it is not as bad as it could be owing to the weather. What needs to be seen is how this year monsoon scenario, El Nino risks, drought risks span out, and what is the spatial distribution of rains in the coming year. That is going to decide our next year. Like I mentioned on pricing, currently we are out of price in the global markets. We are, I think, unless the global markets rally and the oil prices come down, which means logistics prices come down, India so far does not have a play in the export market. Whatever play we will have will be to Bangladesh market. Bangladesh is, in terms of as a geography, is a 7.5 million ton market, growing economy. They have been increasing their import. For them, a price point is a deciding factor. India's proximity and closer transit benefits. So that is one outlay that we have. Additionally, government has to support the industry in terms of bran exports, wheat flour exports, all that can give a big boost to the export market. But other than that, we'll have to wait for global rallies and India to come back into the parity, which so far today it is not.
Okay, thanks a lot, Garimaji. I would say your expertise is extraordinary. And you rightly mentioned, like, India has been safeguarded from any of these springs and protests because there is a saying, 9 missed meals is anarchy, right? So at least we won't have that scenario in the medium or long term as well. We are pretty secured on that. And secondly, on monsoon part of it, I see a big challenge. Whatever data I've been reading across the globe. This challenge is unfortunately this time El Nino is not very restricted to the geographies which are local geographies impacted, for example, Southeast Asia or to certain extent Africa. It is impacting all the way to Latin America, even to North America. So those challenges are extreme. All the prediction of some of the expert of early monsoon and all that, they are flitted away. We are already seeing delayed monsoon. So geospatial spread as well as the timeline spread of monsoon is going to be very destructive. And let's hope this prophecy doesn't come true. But in my view is that we'll be having the worst possible weather we have seen in a century. So with that,
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, you would like to add something, can you imagine?
I just wanted to add on your point that I think going forth for the next 6 months, 1 year, we have to prepare ourselves in various kind of scenarios, which means Australian drought, which means Taiwan Strait disruption. You never know, the current Red Sea closure, and how India gets back to the Indian wheat export market. And all in all, in one line, India has to think, because we also have to move from food security to nutrition security, how India can play its card better to do that journey to reach a nutrition security as well. So thank you for the opportunity.
No, my pleasure. And while the India is talking about getting more maize into ethanol stores, interesting times. Thank you. So now we move to our next speaker, and he's a Dion of the industry, my mentor, a strong support for me, whatever I do. I would like to welcome Somnath ji. So Somnath Chatterjee is a legendary supply chain executive with over 33 years of experience serving as Executive Vice President and Procurement and Logistics for ITC Limited's food division. Managing an expensive procurement budget across a massive domestic network, he is an expert in raw material price forecasting, agriculture sourcing, and risk mitigation. His leadership has pioneered the integration of advanced digital technology into fragmented rural procurement markets, setting the national benchmark for corporate supply chain efficiency. I would again add one more point, the type of the product, type of vision, whenever I discuss with him, gives you a humongous potential of a human brain. Thank you, Somnath ji, for being part of this discussion, sir.
Thank you for that very lengthy. I'm suffering from a little bit of a patchy internet connection, so I hope I'm audible and clear.
Yes, sir, you're audible. You're audible. You're audible.
Right, Deepak ji, as usual. So for the benefit of the larger audience, if I may introduce basically what I do. As you can see, the brand, which is my background, Ashirvad Atta, I represent ITC. This is perhaps world's largest branded packaged whole wheat flour at a volume of nearly 2 million tons. So with that background, over to you, Deepak ji. Shoot away.
Sorry, I was on mute. So yeah, yes, sir. Actually, being a consumer of Ashirvad regularly, right? I consume it a lot. One of the best wheat flour you can get your hands on Indian shelf. And even actually the best thing is that when you travel abroad, you always have access to Ashirvad, so your taste doesn't change. And every place, whether you're in Dubai or you're in India and US, the taste always same. So given the 3 decades of experience, how do you see the price forecasting fundamentally changing in today's scenario when we see climate and crisis volatility being there?
Yeah, Deepak ji. So, since I handle more than 4,872 different uh, items of procurement, wheat, of course, is the main. Terminologies. Earlier, we used to use words like VUCA, and we used to use words like food versus fuel. And now those have changed. Now it is not VUCA, but it's a perma crisis. So we are always living from tweet to tweet, truth social to truth social. There is a crisis always brewing somewhere. In the midst of all this, of course, you guys have already touched upon the fact that the Indian rupee has not been very supportive, and now we have a concern with weather. So I'll come to the weather part in a short while. But before I do that, earlier this theme we started discussing, and it turned out to be a reality: food versus fuel, right? But today the reality is that food has really been weaponized, okay, by all countries. And I know this, we are discussing wheat over here, but if I may take the liberty and the indulgence of the listener to just kind of correlate, because all agri commodities at the end of the day are correlated. So look at the mandates. Look at the mandate of ethanol in this mandate on 2 million tons extra soya oil going into biodiesel. Look at Indonesia, which has increased the biofuel mandate of palm oil from 40% to 50%. Similar increases we are seeing in Malaysia. We are seeing India now going from E20 scenario to E30, which is almost a given. And you did touch upon how that will impact all three large carbohydrate crops of India, namely rice, corn, and of course, sugarcane. So today, yeah, and every country is now trying to. Indonesia has now gone into, saying that every kilo of palm oil that you sell has to be sold through a canalizing agency, which is controlled by the government, etc. So every country is trying to sequester and hold back onto their own resources. So in a scenario on for ethanol, etc., I think in a year when such geopolitical flux is happening, shipping disruptions are happening, India has indeed been blessed by 3 bountiful monsoons in the past. Our granaries are, touch wood, overflowing. So we don't have an immediate short-term or a medium-term problem on availability of food grains. We do have abundant because of liberal import policy earlier. So for food, for the short and medium term, we are sorted. We don't have a problem. Now, if I may continue, Deepak ji, please come in because it's been a while.
No, sir, actually, I would also like you to touch upon the weather.
Yeah. So we a little bit of a research aided by AI, wonderful tool. It helps us make decisions and gives us data which is so deep. So let me share some of that with you. And this we were doing for several agri commodities, not only wheat. And what came out was that this year we can expect the mother of all El Ninos, or the father of all El Ninos. In fact, it's the mythological sea monster which is to devour entire ships. So it's called the India and agri commodities when El Nino events have happened in the past. So the last one was a small one, 23-24, and we did see disruptions, but it was not so bad. The one which really impacted us seminally was the 2015-2016 El Nino. And there we were going into historical records. Most agri commodity prices shot up quite sharply. There was distress. WPI, for that period had shot up by 11.8%. Now that is a worrying number. That is a worrying number, and we don't want a repeat of anything close to that. But if I may go through and explain a little bit more, so which was really the worst El Nino ever known to mankind? And what AI tells us is that it was the 1886-87 El Nino, which was almost a 20-month event. The interesting data points: the surface sea temperatures had gone up by 2.8 degrees, and that caused such an upheaval. 60 million people had died. In fact, AI told us that more people died in that El Nino out of drought and starvation than all the wars in human history. So this is the kind of impact we are looking at. Now, 2.8 was what we had seen back then in the 1800s. Today, where are we? Today, we are at 1.1. So you will argue with me that, yeah, 2.8 tha, and this is 1.1. So we are not anywhere close to danger. But this is not even, we haven't even entered the zone of El Nino. In fact, the half-life of this El Nino is now being predicted by experts to be somewhere around October, November, or maybe even December of this year. So we have not really entered the zone. And already if it is at 1.1 higher, and there's this humongous body of water, which the scientists have discovered, and 50 meters below the sea, the temperatures are monitored. And at that point of time, 1887 or whatever, that big one, there were no scientists around to be measuring these temperatures. But nobody has seen that temperatures rising 6 degrees above normal. So 50 meters below the sea, the temperature is actually 6 degrees higher than a long period average. And this 6 degrees can easily translate to 2.5, 3.5 degrees higher in the coming months. So now I hope I've been able to explain to you how serious this can be.
No, sure, sir. So now, sir, coming to a fundamental, the last question with you, as someone who is procuring so much, when you see these numbers, and congratulations for using AI, and I think that's the future. Any company which is not using AI tools, right, is doomed to get drowned, right? Maybe not with El Nino, La Nina for sure. And this is where how do you see going forward the demand and supply of wheat impacting your own procurement decision, and how do you shield yourself? You are not a trader. You need that wheat to ensure the beautiful brand which you are behind you, right, is available to me for next multiple years. How do you take calls in such a scenario as someone who is a procurement head of one of the largest corporation in the world?
So, in Indian astrology, there are these malefic planets, which are called Rahu and Ketu, etc. And they are the ones who cause you harm. So,
Somnaji, I'm just on a lighter side, right? I'm troubled by Shani more than Rahu Ketu.
Well, Shani, of course, is called, Karam Phal Data. So he will only treat you as well as you treat others, right? But Rahu and Ketu are genuinely. So what I was trying to tell you is, just visualize that your ship has sunk, but you are again very lucky because it has sunk close to the shore, and you are a very powerful swimmer, and then you are swimming towards the shore, and you can feel the ground beneath your feet, and you think, okay, you are saved, and suddenly a shark comes and eats you up from the back. So that is exactly what happened to the Indian farmer and us, unfortunately, this year. So we were looking at a record crop. We had a record crop. Okay, it was brilliant. Everything was going well. And then suddenly, around the Indian festival of Holi, we saw the temperatures rise very sharply for a period of 18 days. Okay, that caused some shriveling and some damage. And then again, there were some beneficial rainfalls, etc. Temperatures came down, but so the heat stress problem got solved. But then we started having hailstorms. And that again caused a lot of damage and a lot of lodging, right? So today, very interesting statistics. The government of India, FCI, has been able to procure 35 million tons, like Garimaji was just mentioning to you. Great job. But you know something? What is hidden inside that 35 million metric tons? 24.2 million tons is under relaxed specifications. So basically, what does that mean? It means luster loss wheat. It means wheat which has got a high degree of, which has got lodged, which has been picked up and cleaned, etc. High degree of mud balls and impurities, etc. It has got, potia, as we call it. So we are basically going to be dealing with very poor quality wheat. So a lot of that is going to be around, and that is wheat which you can't store for very long. Willy-nilly, Government of India, millers, whoever, they will have to convert it into all-purpose wheat flour, which is good for making cheaper biscuits, etc. They will have to use it up very quickly in the next 6-7 months. They can't hold on to it. So what is in scarcity this year, despite a record crop, is really the good quality, high hectoliter, good quality, high gluten wheat, right? That is in scarce supply. And we have been, fortunate through our agribusiness division, we've been able to sequester what we need, because with our Ashirvad Atta, we can't take any risk with quality. So we come bullish market or bearish market, we never bother. We go in during the season, we pick up the quality of wheat that we want, because we have to supply you with Ashirvad Atta for 12 months, right? Or the same consistent standards. And incidentally, before I sign off, I would like to advise everybody that we have come up with this wonderful protein-rich atta, which you guys all must try under the Ashirvad brand. So three chapatis will give you 25% of your daily protein requirement, right? So this is the age of GLP-1, and the significance of protein can't be overstressed. So with that, over to you, Deepak ji.
Thank you, Somnath ji. And I am a big fan of protein-rich atta, because I think protein should be in everything. And also for our kids, right? 1/3 of world's stunted and wasted kids are in India, and that's directly related to the proteins. So great initiative. Congratulations, all the best. And if I can play any role in any form in that, more than happy to do that. And you know that I've been continuously promoting the protein-rich atta in India, because I love my puris and chapatis. I cannot live without it. And if it is having protein, it makes my life easy. Thank you, Somnath ji. Pleasure having you, sir.
Before I sign off, one final comment to compliment you. So after 35 years in the industry, it's so heartening to see a young evangelist, agri-evangelist like you, who is coming in and who has put together this wonderful platform. And believe me, it's high time that we got as well networked as your commodity is doing. So more power to you, Deepak ji. God bless.
Thank you. Touched my heart. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So now we move to our next speaker, and we have Mr. Ajay Goel. He's an eminent grain industry leader, currently serving as the chairman of the Wheat Products Promotion Society, WPPS. With decades of commercial experience in agriculture processing sector, he is a premier authority on Indian wheat crop conditions, harvest quality parameters, and mill procurement strategies. His expertise lies in national market advocacy, food safety policy, and facilitating critical public-private dialogues to ensure a stable, high-quality grain supply chain for domestic and export sector. Welcome, sir, Ajay ji. Your initial comment, because you have just heard Somnath ji, right?
Yes,
talking
yes.
about, and I would, rather than asking a question, your initial comments on what he said, and I know your thought process also matches a lot with what he says. So, addition to that, sir.
Yeah, so Deepak ji, thank you. You have given a good analysis of the data, and then Garima has given us the global macro view on wheat, which is quite an input. And Somnath ji and Ashirvad Atta has also told us how it is a challenge to maintain quality, consistent quality round the year with all the geopolitical weather and all these sort of threats. So I guess. It is like a continuous battle, the game of wheat. Although we have a harvest once in a year, but the battle is fought around the year, it seems, as far as wheat is concerned, because it is harvested at different times in different parts of the world, and so it's quite a dynamic situation for wheat around the year.
Perfect, sir. Very well articulated. So, according to you, what are the biggest logistical bottleneck when managing domestic procurement? And we are seeing, like, the fuel prices going up. Somnaji touched upon the quality aspect. A miller actually needs two things, right? A good quality product. And even if farmers are getting good money, you don't mind. But eventually, the logistic cost and the wastage across the supply chain should be as minimal as possible to make you profitable. How do you see these two scenarios, right, impacting a miller like you?
So, leaving aside government policy, there are two, three critical aspects as far as quality of wheat and the logistics to bring it to the mill is concerned. First and foremost is the qualitative parameters. So, Food Corporation of India, which is the biggest agency, they are buying on the basis of dockage, and they normally accept all wheat. So, it is a problem of segregation, which a private entrepreneur is able to do it, and he is marking out which are the areas where he would like to procure for his audience, what is suitable, and things like that. So I guess it is challenging because the entire geography from where he's procuring changes every 2 3 years, as there are crop patterns are changing, or weather patterns are changing, or seeds are changing. So that is something which most millers keep themselves abreast with. So like the popular hotspots would be, say, Ganganagar for a miller in South India for parotha flour, or some other miller making atta, a kapli wheat, maybe Rajasthan or certain pockets. So I think these things are identified. The bigger problem is segregation and selling as per variety instead of just A, B, and CD, or HL, which is now traded. If we could arrive at a protein-based, sale, wherein we are able to assess the amount of protein in the wheat when it comes up for sale, as it happens globally. What we notice is that in India, wheat is sold as wheat with a plus or minus 2, 3, 4% discount or premium, depending on the quality or the requirement or the condition of the wheat or the dockage. So I guess we need to evolve a little bit more as far as the protein quality or the protein content in the wheat is concerned, and some quick test methods, so that we are also able to offer homogeneous large size lots of similar qualities. Today, the variation in wheat from truck to truck, area to area, farm to farm is a big challenge for a miller. The second one, I think, is pesticide residue is not applicable. No norms are applicable on raw wheat. So be it. But there are stringent norms on finished products. So I guess industry has to sit down with FDA and the agricultural scientists and think of a way so that the miller is not prosecuted for pesticide residue in atta traces, because that is something which can only be prevented or regulated at farm end. So I guess this is a second challenge. As far as logistics is concerned, so of course wheat arrives in the loose format in mandis and it is bagged. And thank God we have a few silos coming up and more silos coming up. But still, the last mile connectivity from the silo to the mill is still to be created. It's a funny practice where we notice that a lot of FCI silos uh, pack the wheat into bags and then load it. So I think we need to create that little that last mile gap needs to be bridged, so that we can handle more and more wheat in bulk, and we save on packaging costs, which is unwarranted, and we get into a more efficient supply. And then if wheat is kept in silos, it is more better for the life of the wheat, the quality of the wheat. I guess these are the few points that I can highlight.
Now, coming to the elephant in the room, like, the WPBS being an association engaged regularly with the government, and government policies are sometimes, when you see in the hindsight, look great, but when you see actually happening on the ground, and hindsight also depending on who you're asking, right? And that creates a lot of conflicts, a lot of debate, discussions. Where do you see the government policy impacting as a miller's lens, right? I know we have to support farmers. I know we have to ensure consumer gets the cheapest or maybe free food. That's given. But for industry to survive, where do you see that actually government can do a little bit more? Because I know everybody says government is already doing great, but I would like to add it, how they can do a little bit more to ensure that actually the sector, because if you ask me, my own reading is that sector is bleeding, right? That is what I would say. Maybe on camera, not too many people will agree with that. But at the same time, we have to see to it that without Miller, I cannot eat raw wheat. I need it to come in some form, some processed form. And how do you see that actually that the sector, the milk sector, get some support from the government in a format which you feel would help the most?
So I guess, the Indian market by the government of India has been totally insulated and decoupled from the government markets. We have our own wheat economy year after year over here, as far as farmer prices are concerned or market prices are concerned. Very little seems to affect Indian wheat trajectory compared to the global. So there was a time when people were tracking CBOT, but I think now there is no point tracking CBOT at all because we are totally decoupled. And that has happened because the government is very fearful as far as wheat is concerned. It is almost, very scared to let it float free. So what we are seeing is a scenario where the government is paying a very good, reasonable price to the farmer and then subsidizing the entire logistical and carry cost for the PDS consumer. And also, since it's an artificial price and not a real market price, also have to subsidize sales. What the only request that the industry has from the government is they can protect the interest of everybody they seem as vulnerable, be it the farmer or the consumer, but they should clarify policy. And that has been the long term demand of the industry, that every year is different, we agree to that, and every year has different challenges and different upsides. But by 15th of June, the government is having a clear picture of how much we have produced, how much is our consumption, and what is the situation with other cereals, and most of the data is with the government. I guess if the government spelt out their policy on the 15th of June or thereabouts, that would bring in a lot of clarity and save a lot of losses for traders and millers. Because what has happened is the past 2 years have gone in anticipating government policy. It's like a game of chess. You don't know when you will be checkmated by the government. And it is like a government versus the industry sort of a scenario wherein the government is not trusting industry to take care of consumer needs, and they feel they will propel prices higher, which is actually not in the interest of industry, because raw material prices higher is not good for any industry. But somehow there has to be much more trust building, that the private sector or the processing sector is a part of the national wheat chain, value chain and economy. And I guess there is a more trust building steps that is required currently.
So, as a parting remark from you, what would be the one most important dialogue you think Indian wheat value chain should be having, irrespective whether within the private circles or the government circle? What would be that one discussion you think we should be having on a regular basis and keep on hammering that to ensure that it will have maximum impact?
So I think it is very difficult to find a formula 44 for this, simply because the government is the most dominant player and everything is full of subsidies as far as the farmer is concerned, storage, logistics, sales. And here you have a free market, somebody trying to play the free market game. So it just doesn't work out. The footprint of the government is so large that, and the interests that they have to protect are so variant, that it is very difficult for private sector to genuinely play a game on its own. It is just under the shadow of the government, and as the government desires, the cart keeps moving as far as wheat is concerned, and that is what I've observed in the past, half a decade so far.
Thanks a lot, Ajay. And I would say that the one biggest discussion which industry and the government should be having today is how do you ensure that our buffers are there, but everything is done by the private sector with their efficiency rather than government, right, being omnipresent everywhere. And I think the government is need to think about getting out of business of wheat while ensuring the buffers are there and consumer get at the right price and farmer also get money, and let private sector sort out this complex equation rather than government putting their heads with multiple department, multiple PSUs, and then actually make this a khichdi rather than a chapati. Thank you, Goelji. It was pleasure having you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
So now let me move to our next speaker, and we continue talking about the milling industry, and we are having an eminent voice of the industry, Mr. Mitesh Gupta. He's a progressive industry leader serving as managing director of Shiftara Grain Milling and honorary secretary of the Roller Floor Millers Federation of India. Representing a century-long milling legacy and educated at NUS and New York, he is an expert in corporate restructuring, behavioral economics, and technology adoption. His professional focus centers on driving digital transformation within the wheat processing value chain and advocating for modernization policies across regional milling network. Welcome, Mitesh ji.
Thank you. Thanks, Deepak ji. Really wonderful. And, after Ajay Bhaiya, Somnath ji, Garima, I don't know what else I can add, but I'll give it a shot.
No, actually, I'm having expertise in getting this out of people, so don't worry. We will have a very, very engaging discussion. So Mitesh, the first question, actually, I love when I was reading about you about the behavioral economics. So where does the behavioral economics intersect with the mill procurement, especially during period of panic buying or supply uncertainty? Because traders also have behavioral issues, right? Anxiety is always there, and at the same time, some traders, they are care for nothing type of mindsets, right? Where they actually come and sometimes distort the market and sometimes give, I would say, hope to the market. Your views on that, sir?
See, I feel Miller's procurement decisions, especially during uncertainty, especially during panic buying, is more driven by the psyche, the psychology, than by the fundamentals. If you're asking me about where does behavioral economics intersect with wheat procurement, one classic example I can have is the prospect theory by Daniel Kahneman, loss aversion. And as human beings, we are all averse to loss, right? So loss aversion is the idea that people experience for the same amount of money, let's say 10 lakh rupees, the pain of losing that 10 lakh rupees, we feel that pain a lot more than the pleasure of earning 10 lakh rupees, right? And that loss aversion can clearly be seen in wheat buying during panic buying. Millers feel the pain of buying at a higher price and watching the wheat price fall, more than what they see the equivalent rise in price. So let's say if they buy it at 2,800 and the prices fall to 2,700, the pain is a lot more than watching it go from 2,800 to 2,900. This is one thing I can see where it intersects. I feel also a little bit of herding and anchoring. When prices are rising, millers, traders feel that, okay, kal ka rate ye tha. Let's say yesterday was 2,500. So it is justified to buy at any price higher than 2,500. So they anchor the price at yesterday's price. It is not anchored based on what is their order book or what is the quantity they require or they plan to stock. Yeah, and herding behavior, obviously, when everyone's buying, you feel a bit of FOMO. You feel that let me just buy. I think everyone's buying, so prices must be going up. And of course, the reverse happens even while prices go down, which happened in end of March and early April this year, where the prices were rock bottom, but millers were just waiting to see, okay, how much or kitna girega or kitna girega.
No, I totally agree with you that herd mentality is unfortunately is a hallmark of right, how the trade happens, not just in wheat, in multiple commodities in India. तुअर का भाव लोगों को 50 रुपए भी they feel that it is too high currently, and then they end up buying at 130 also. They feel that actually still there is a gas. So I totally agree with you. Like, this is a problem. Now, see, one way of removing anxiety and the pangs of, like, following the herd is actually when you adopt technology, right? And also when you push towards more economization of your own operations, milling operation, making them more efficient. In both the places, I see, except couple of players. For example, Somnaji talked about AI. I see overall pessimism, right? When it comes to, if I talk about AI predictions, when I talk about using data, And you'll be surprised to know that some of the most senior people in the industry, their first response would be actually to discount it. It doesn't work. Yaar, mera trader hai, is like, there are so many of the parameters, your AI engine cannot look into it. It's difficult. But Adi, one of the legendary technical analysts, right? Yesterday he was on the Maze panel. And he said that actually, like, if we are not hedging, and hedging is just not about the hedging in the market, but hedging using data information, then you are just speculating. How do you see that adoption of technology, right, happening in the Indian sector? Because I see that, the green shoots come, then it disappears. But again, those who are using it and getting benefit out of it, they are also not coming out vocally because they say that it's good for me, right? Others are not using, I am using it, I am getting the benefit. So how do you see that gap, right, getting filled in the industry?
I don't see, so in this industry, I don't see much technology, surprisingly. And there is technology being used for accounting packages, maybe a little bit for CRM, maybe a little bit for logistics, etc. But using technology for wheat procurement, I don't see, and I haven't heard of anyone using it, to be honest. I feel more than technology, the solution for the herding behavior or the prospect theory, whenever prices rise or come down, is just having a process that what is the quantity I want to procure as a miller? Do I want to keep 1 month or 2 months or 3 months of stock? What is my window for procurement? So if it's only April, May, and let's say another half month, 75 days, of which let's say 20% are government holidays. So if I have a 50-day window and I want to procure, for example, 5,000 tons, I think a simple solution should be whether prices are going up or down, we just procure that 100 tons a day, even if the prices are 1 or 2% higher or lower. That is, for wheat procurement. But of course, the industry needs to adopt a lot of technology. In fact, I've had a couple of learning sessions for all our members to see if we can move towards more technology that will make us more efficient. But I see the adoption to be very, very slow.
Perfect. No, so I understand adoption is slow. But so again, going to behavioral aspect, right? People understand that actually technology disruption every other sector, right? And same people actually, in fact, some of your colleagues in the industry, right? They reach out to me and say that actually, like, do you think this upcoming OpenAI IPO, right, is it worth investing? Because I see it to be like, very possible of making good returns. So they understand, in fact, like, when they see in other sectors. But when it comes to their own sectors, there is a pessimism. Is it like, also again, the herd mentality that nobody's doing it, why I should do it?
Yes, little bit would be herd mentality. They haven't heard of success stories of one or two other millers. I feel once there are few millers who are successful in using technology, using AI to transform or improve efficiency, I think it will come up pretty quickly. The Indian milling industry is filled with entrepreneurs, and luckily the next generation is also coming into this industry. So I don't see a challenge in adopting it whenever there's a opportunity or a package ready, I would say. I myself have tried technology a couple of times and failed. I tried SAP a few years back, integrating all my units and all the, from procurement to collections into and production into SAP. We failed. We're still trying ERP next. We have Salesforce, we have FleetX for logistics, we have like 5, 6 different things for HRM. But getting one platform like SAP or ERP next, I think millers are a little shy adopting it. Secondly, also being SMEs, we don't have the size and the scale as yet to adopt the larger ERP platforms as yet.
Perfect. Now, a little bit contentious issue, right? Government has opened up exports, right? You already heard some of the legends in the industry, and they say that except Bangladesh doesn't look too much of feasibility. What are your views, and do you think there is any play where some policy change can ensure that actually, like, at least we take the half of the quota which is being allowed by the government?
See, exports, even though they opened it, The opportunity definitely is real and underexploited. India is a top wheat producer, the second largest wheat producer in the world, but a marginal exporter of wheat products. The margin in for our country will not come by exporting raw grain. I think everyone understands there's a better margin by exporting the wheat products, which is atta, maida, suji, etc., and even maybe further down processed products like biscuits and macaroni and pastas and etc. Um, there are a lot of bottlenecks. I feel it's like playing that game of Pac-Man. When you eat one of those cherries on the side, you know that exports has opened up, but you also know that they're going to close it very quickly. At some point they're going to close it. You don't know which monster from which corner is going to come and eat you up on the side. The biggest bottleneck I see is policy unpredictability. The frequent flip-flop between open export, close export, give a small quantity, make it difficult for the exporter in terms of number of departments, licenses, etc., uh, quotas. It destroys the buyer trust and it destroys the seller's resilience. International buyers, from what I understand, need suppliers who they can count on for years, not for just a few months. The second biggest challenge, which I think Ajay Bhai also touched upon, is the domestic price of wheat versus the international price of wheat does not align. There's no uh, parity for Indian wheat products exports, at least in the last few years. I hope it comes up in the next couple of years. But there's usually wheat prices in India are much higher than international wheat prices. So I think the government needs to do something about that so that we are competitive to export our wheat products. Currently, I think Garima or somebody touched upon it, the logistics is a big challenge. The port handling, the port container availability to a lot of countries, the container freight to a lot of countries has gone up so much because of the war in the Gulf. Um, though I think I'm hoping that would be temporary. And because of the policy uncertainty, branding of Indian wheat products overseas, I don't think there is any recognized player other than maybe one who you had earlier. I don't think there are recognized Indian wheat products, Indian milled brands in the markets where the demand is strong. The demand is strong because of Indian diaspora all across the world. And what I've come to understand now is even the Indian brands that are selling in those markets are not selling Indian milled wheat. They're selling atta from neighboring countries. So I think, India has the volume, India has a diaspora demand. What we lack is policy stability, policy clarity, policy consistency. And only when that is there will the millers invest in a branding push to convert this advantage into a value added product other than just grain.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Miteshji, for your intervention. And I strongly believe that if you are not able to provide consistent, high quality, economical raw material, the government's push towards food processing is not going to take off. And this is where the government has to sit and think that why our diaspora is consuming Indian brand, but as Miteshji rightly pointed out, milled outside India. With that, I would like to go to our next speaker. Thanks a lot, Miteshji. It was a pleasure having you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's really wonderful what you're doing, Deepak ji. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So our next speaker in house is Mr. Ashish Chaturvedi. Mr. Ashish Chaturvedi is an expert in commodity, currently serving as the general manager for grains and rice at Olam Agri. He brings extensive regional experience in global trading, specializing in the origination, risk management, and cross-border distribution of massive rice and grain portfolio. His core expertise lies in navigating the intricate trade dynamics of APAC region, managing volatile trade books, and implementing sustainable sourcing practices to optimize large-scale international agriculture value chains. Welcome, Ashish. It's a pleasure to have you, sir.
Thanks a lot, Deepak Bhai, and good morning to everyone. Thanks for having me as a part of this such an elite group on wheat discussion. I still consider myself as the student of this market. and it's great learning amongst all of you. Thanks for
We
this
all
opportunity.
we all are student with I would say different classes, right, based on our experience. So you and me, we are novices learning from the giants. It's always a pleasure to have you as well, because I consider your understanding on ground execution capabilities and your direct access to what's happening on a real time basis very critical. And maybe the other speakers and panelists who were there who would also learn a lot from your intervention. So let me delve into the first question itself. So as per you, how are the shifting trade dynamics in Asia, specifically South Asia region, forcing originators to fundamentally restructure their cross-border strategies?
Sure, Deepak bhai. And before I start, I think you have chosen a great day for this discussion on wheat, because I hope a lot of people know about Munshi Premchand's Do June Ki Roti, and it's 2nd June today. And this actually sets the context that why wheat is not just a commodity, why it is about our food security. And obviously, all the previous discussions definitely touched upon why wheat is such a sensitive commodity, and why all the governments are actually planning to secure the food security. So with that, to your question, Deepak bhai, I think Asia region is one of the most important regions in terms of the overall global wheat trade. Specifically, countries like China, Indonesia, Philippines, and Bangladesh. All of these countries are the major importers of wheat, and actually define how the markets are going to play. Specifically, from India's point of view, Bangladesh is the neighboring country which has a very good demand of almost 6.5 to 7 million metric ton. And since 2021, so in 21, when India opened up the export opportunities, they were the biggest beneficiaries because of the logistics cost that is very cheaper getting into Bangladesh. So that time Bangladesh emerged as one of the largest importers of Indian wheat. But because of the ban which was announced during 2022, they had to look at different other origins, and today almost 60% of their requirement gets fulfilled from the Black Sea region, which includes Russia and Ukraine predominantly. And also some of their imports happens from Australia and other regions like Canada. And of late, we have seen that the government has taken initiative to also diversify the imports, and they have also had G2G arrangements with US to secure good quality wheat from those regions. So we have seen that all of the countries are making efforts to diversify their origins from which they buy, and they are not depending on single or two origins. They are looking for all the opportunities to import from different regions. And for India, I think Bangladesh throws a very good opportunity where we can look at fulfilling this demand, by creating or improving the border infrastructures, and also by having some G2G arrangements, which can also work on the bilateral food security with the country. I think already there are some discussions going around on the comprehensive economic partnership agreement with Bangladesh. And if something can emerge, I think that can throw a very good opportunity not only for wheat but for also other commodities and services as well. So in the past, also in 2024, we had seen that that time the governments had good coordination, and that time Bangladesh approached India for getting support on 4 to 5 commodities, and India definitely went ahead and tried to help. I think with the now new government in Bangladesh, I think that relationship can be taken ahead. But yes, Asia Pacific region is one of the important trade regions for wheat, and obviously all of these important importing countries are looking at diversification, and everybody is keeping a close watch on how these geopolitical scenarios emerge, because for the Asian region, the Red Sea and the Suez Canal are two important transit routes through which the Black Sea wheat flows into Asia, and any impact on these trade flows can definitely impact them a big time. So obviously everybody is keeping a watch on that and hoping that things improve from here. and do not worsen.
Perfect, Ashishji. And now coming to when you are doing procurement and currently with the geopolitical risk, the climate risk, the challenges all around, there is a lot of risk associated with any decision you take. According to you, actually, what framework is the most resilient framework for risk mitigation today? Because as you know that we don't have too much of option in India, right? You cannot go just like on CBOT and then take a position in India. That's not a possibility. And as India is insulated from rest of the world, taking position on seaboard based on India's number doesn't also make sense, right? So what are the frameworks when you take these calls and to mitigate the risk?
Uh, so I think, Deepak bhai, it is if we talk about the global wheat, it is an interplay between the currency, the oil price movement, the geopolitics, the freight environment, the policy decisions of different governments. And yes, for Indian context also, I would say it is not a pure trading hedge today. It is more about creating a policy aware supply chain where we have to very closely watch on the government policy on what kind of procurement they are doing, what quality of wheat they are buying, what kind of how what is the S&D of the government, and basis that what kind of interventions can be expected in the OMSS. Then there is also some prediction on what kind of pricing they can come in OMSS. So it is all this actually hovers around the government policy and the action decisions which they can keep which they can take in a particular year. This year specifically, I think in terms of the overall production, uh, earlier the estimates were that India will have a very bumper crop, but as Somnath sir touched upon, just before the harvest there were a lot of weather incidents that actually made sure that the overall production is not as big as we were expecting. And then initially we saw that the government was slightly reluctant in the procurement, but now we are seeing that they are aggressively, they have increased the dates for procurement. They have been very aggressive in certain states to ensure that they are able to procure much. And now I think the entire game is in the hands of the government, and the risk management is around anticipating the policy decisions by the government and accordingly playing around. In India's wheat milling industry, I would say it is about managing 2 to 3 months of forward coverage and accordingly ensuring that you have the sales to the institutional buyers and your domestic market sales, and accordingly doing the procurement. And in the long term, it is about assessing the government policy, I would say.
Very importantly, you touched upon assessing or anticipating government policies. So, what are the mechanism actually? How do you anticipate? Do you have any structure where actually, you try to decipher data or the intent or having ears right in Krishi Bhavan, right, to help you doing that?
I think uh, over the years, the government has done a great job by controlling the food security, and their intention is to ensure that around the year India has sufficient supplies of the grains, predominantly wheat and rice. And most of the policies have been around managing those situations. And because of that, this year we had opened on a very good and comfortable stock of almost 22 million metric ton. And there are no exact frameworks, but it is about how rationally you can think on how the government is acting. So today, uh, initially the market was anticipating that the government procurement would be around 27 to 28 million metric ton against their target of 30 million metric ton. But then we saw that the government came ahead and said that they want to extend the procurement targets from 30 to almost 34 million metric tons, where they increased the buying plans for Madhya Pradesh, where relatively the quality was better as compared to other states like UP and Haryana, Punjab. So it clearly shows an intention that government is definitely gearing up, for a season where we have risks of El Nino, where we have risks of supply chain related to the fertilizers, and they are definitely planning better and they are forward looking to ensure that even next year we are opening with a good and comfortable carryover stock. So looking at the current situation with a 22 million metric ton of opening stock plus a 35 million metric ton of procurement, the total wheat in the kitty of government is almost 57 million metric ton. They have already increased the allocation for PDS from around 19.5, 20 million metric tons to around 22 million metric ton this year. So this clearly shows that they are ready to infuse more quantities under the PDS scheme. And even if they, allocated 22 million metric tons, they still have 35 million metric tons in hand, and they can easily come up with 10 to 12 million metric ton of OMSS supplies in the market whenever they feel that there is a time to make the availability improve the availability and bring down the prices. So I think they are in control of the entire situation. They can completely command the situation as per the requirement, as per the geopolitical scenarios, how do they play out going forward, and basis that they will be able to definitely control the situations better.
I totally agree with you. In fact, Ashish, over past month, I was having interaction with a lot of people who are into wheat trade, and even that, the people who are into policy making. And I strongly believe that government is looking more as availability than affordability. In fact, that is also the reason actually, of late recently they've increased the availability in the PDS. OMSS, I still believe they would not be very enthused, right, to go the OMS way, because the people who consume, right, from the private sector, right, they don't mind giving a little bit more by seeing the all around inflation we are seeing in different commodities. But people actually who cannot afford, government is having very well structured, well oiled machinery, right, to give them grains at hardly no price. So I think availability is something which government would be guarding very closely. Only constraint could be about the quality loss. And I think how government is looking at the possibility of the old stock getting liquidated. So I think it will depend on that actually how much government want to liquidate the old stock rather than looking at something which they would like to take care of the current stock. And as Somnaji also mentioned that 2/3 of what government is procured is a relaxed quality.
Yeah,
right.
true.
And even if half of that is not actually milling quality, then coming out with OMSS is also not going to impact much. And it may be it will also give insight about what is the actual quality availability of the government. So there are, I would say, a lot of challenges. And I would also like to add, when we talk about the government policies across the globe, when they become very insecure, right? It is you travel from, say, London to Paris, and instead of one ticket, you say that I want to buy two tickets, so that in case one is lost, I'll have still second one. So the inspector asks you, then both of them can also get lost. They said, I'm having a monthly pass as well. So taking too much precaution can also be counterproductive. Now, coming to the last question with you, going forward, what are the ground level trade signals, right, which would be impacting your procurement decision this year?
Sure. So I think, Deepak bhai, I think the government, I think again, it is about prediction of what the government is doing, what kind of policies they can come out with. Today, we feel that government is preparing themselves for a year where they can have risks from El Nino. There could be some productivity risk because of higher prices in the inputs, fertilizers, and also the availability of inputs. So I think the government is gearing up for that kind of a year. So clearly, I think as they have done the procurement of 35 million metric ton, as you rightly said, majority of it is slightly under the relaxed norms. So the market will also have to anticipate when these release come out, how much of it will be suitable for the milling. Accordingly, they have to hedge their requirements for the good quality wheat during the season. I think we are already almost towards the fag end now. Another 1 month of good arrivals, good quality wheat arrivals. So this is the time when the industry needs to plan for the for hedging the requirement of the good quality wheat, and then also looking at the fiscal situation of the government. We don't expect that the government is going to come out with very reduced prices under OMSs, it will definitely be at par with the market prices. So government might actually wait for a couple of months to look at the situation, how the monsoon is panning out, how the sowing is progressing for the Kharif season, and then probably make a view and then come out with the clear-cut OMSs policies, which I don't think will be, discounting from the current or the expected wheat prices, which will prevail 2-3 months ahead from here. So I think understanding the current context on how the government is operating, what kind of policy expectations can be made, I think we have to play around that. So, and definitely whatever good quality wheat is required has to be sourced during the season.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Ashish ji, for validating one more point. Actually, आपके कारण हमारे घर की रोटी हरदम रहेगी, because anticipation of the policies and the global geoeconomic is what we do. So I think maybe more business for us. Thank you, Ashish. It's always a pleasure having you, sir.
Thank you, Deepak bhai.
So now we move to our last speaker, and last but not the least, and very important speaker in current scenario. So we'll be having Mr. Denis Voznesensky. He's author of War and Wheat. Now we are seeing challenges in wheat, and war is already in multiple locations across the globe. He navigate markets during the global conflict. He advised on navigating the market during global conflict, acting as agriculture and sustainability economist at the Commonwealth Bank. He's having humongous experience across Australia and UK. He's engaged with broad range of global food supply chain, from farmers to some of the world's largest agriculture traders and food producers. Welcome, Dennis. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So I know that you want to do a presentation. Please
Yes.
share your screen, and you can get going.
So for now, every time I share the screen, it says the sharing is disabled by the host. Maybe there has to be something changed before I can share.
Can you just try now?
Yep, let me do that. 1 second. Okay. Share, that should start working. Let me know when you can see. Okay, so you can see the slide that says global market impact?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you so much for having me, and for everyone listening, I really appreciate your time as well. No doubt it is a busy time in history and just during the year. So today I'm going to talk about the global market impact of rising food security. Everyone has different ways of looking at food security and markets. I like to use a historical angle that I did find in my book. So before I delve into the content, I'll tell you a little bit about who I am. So I work for the Commonwealth Bank. Typically what I do is I do some research on what's going to happen over the next 12 months, what's going to happen over the next 10 years. And then I travel around Australia speaking to everyone from farmers to traders to could be government officials, and also go up to places like Singapore and speak at conferences there as well. So that's my day job. But like you mentioned, I also wrote a book called War and Wheat, Navigating Markets During Global Conflict. It talks about what happened in World War I, World War II, COVID, and the war in Ukraine from a market perspective, and specifically from an Australian market perspective. So today, I'm going to draw on some of those historical concepts. There's going to be 3 key takeaways. The first one is going to sound a little bit counterintuitive, but I'm going to show you why in a moment. Geopolitical disruption could actually lead to lower for longer wheat prices. Secondly, the duration of price spikes may get shorter in the future. And lastly, the need to ensure food security itself could lead to more geopolitical disruption. So let's get to the first point. Geopolitical disruption can cause lower for longer wheat prices in the longer term. So we're going to step a little bit back in history. And ever since the end of the Second World War, we've seen a massive increase in global trade of agricultural commodities. When you combine everything from wheat to corn to oil seeds, you name it, you combine the whole lot. Between the end of World War II and now, we've risen by a factor of 700%. So 7 times more trade now than there was. And trade was largely fostered by a US-led defense infrastructure around the world. Trade routes have been open and protected until recently. Wars were relatively limited. Trade barriers like tariffs were unlikely to be put in place. And if it made economic sense during those decades, you could import or export anything you wanted. No one was going to stop you. Now, these decades of free and protected trade deprioritized self-sufficiency. So countries became not self-sufficient. They started importing more than they need. They started importing and consuming more than they can produce locally. And what this chart here shows in 2 different colors, oilseeds in orange and grains in blue, it shows how many countries have become not self-sufficient, where they consume more than they produce locally. So there's more and more countries that rely on grain imports over time. Now, over the last few decades, rising powers have started to challenge this US-led order around the world. So you've got the likes of Iran and Russia that we're seeing right now in China. We saw Russia challenging the US and the West more broadly with its invasion of Ukraine. We saw the Houthi rebel attacks in the Red Sea causing issues for freight. Right now, we're seeing the Iran and US and Israel conflict causing issues in the Middle East with the likes of fuel and fertilizer. And this ever-looming threat, this ever-looming fear of what happens if there is a war in Asia as well. Following recent disruptions, countries have started to shift their focus more on self-sufficiency. So China's heavily focusing on their food security and reducing how import reliant they are on commodities more broadly, not just wheat, but I'm talking about corn, soybeans, the whole lot. Indonesia's focusing more on food security. You've got Egypt. It goes on, but these are just some prominent examples. Now, the question is, when was the last time in history that a very large chunk of the world's importers started to focus more on food security? Well, after World War I, there was a lot of countries in Europe that were scarred by the food shortages of World War I. And the closer they got to World War II and the more volatile things got around the world, the more the likes of Germany and France and Britain, they all started to focus more on domestic food production. So governments started to subsidize more food production locally. They started producing more than economically it made sense. Now, what was the impact? Well, these are prices of wheat between 1920 and 1933. And you can see the more production there was in these large importing countries, the lower wheat prices went. And the mechanics of it are as follows. So number one, concerned governments began to increase self-sufficiency in food production as geopolitical instability rose. They took policy measures such as protective trade restrictions, for example, on imports. They wanted to reduce imports so they can produce more locally. They put subsidies in place for their farmers. Then production and food supply increased locally, their import demand dropped, and global market prices declined. Now, despite these low prices, because the kind of the quote for low prices is, the cure for low prices is low prices, because eventually someone stops producing and prices go back up. But despite the low prices, the subsidies continued. Governments just told their farmers, plant as much as you possibly can, produce as much as you possibly can. We need it for food security. And the result was a global supply glut that was created. So point 2 is that the duration of price spikes may get shorter. Yes, we're seeing a lot more volatility and a lot more of those price spikes, but they may be getting shorter in terms of how long they last for. There's a misalignment sometimes of national interest with private sector interests. And the result of that misalignment is that governments have to get more involved in markets. And I'll give you a bit more detail on what I mean. So during a crisis, the national interest of a country is to have as much food and fertilizer stockpiled to secure themselves against more supply chain disruptions. However, during a crisis, it's not always in the interest of the private sector to stockpile, for example, fertilizer and food, because if the crisis ends and prices fall sharply, it could lead to large financial losses. So the result we've been seeing around the world is that the government is getting more and more involved in procurement of whether it's crops or fertilizer. So a specific example is that importers of grains and fertilizer imported large volumes when Russia invaded Ukraine, and they did so at high prices. A lot of them got burnt when prices fell, and became hesitant to do so. So now we're seeing examples of governments having to step in and build up just-in-case reserves because it's not what makes economic sense for the private sector. So whether that's for wheat or for fertilizer, we've seen a fair bit of that, especially ever since the US-Iran conflict began, but earlier to that, of course, as well. So how does this dynamic of more government involvement change how the market works? Well, as I was saying, price spikes may become shorter in duration. If large importers build large stocks, they become more resilient to supply shocks and don't have urgency to make purchases during a crisis. Secondly, an interesting dynamic is that the negotiating leverage of sellers is weakened due to a rise of larger buyers. So for a seller dealing with one large government buyer instead of a handful of private sector buyers, it reduces its negotiating power. And I think an interesting one I recently saw in the news is that the European Commission is contemplating having joint procurement of fertilizer. And this is something that happened, again, I'm not comparing the politics of then and now, I'm just giving you an extreme example. But during both World War I and World War II, a lot of the allied countries, they came together in order to procure grain from whether it's Canada or Australia or from the US. Again, an extreme example. And the last one I want to talk about is that the need to ensure food security could actually lead to more geopolitical disruption. So we've been talking about the reverse here for a while, and I assume other panelists have as well. So it's been a lot about how geopolitical disruption causes governments to try to become more food secure. But we haven't talked about the reverse, the fact that the need for food security could actually cause more geopolitical disruption. The more disruption there is, the more governments will try to shore up their supply chains. And this could take the form of securing trade routes to major origin markets. So you as an importer want to make sure that the trade route to where you source your wheat from is free and you can actually go through there. And some countries are looking at owning or building their own vessels. Now, America is not an example for an importer of grain, but nonetheless, it sees the importance of having its own domiciled locally shipping fleet and being able to build their own ships, because during crisis, those that actually have their own vessels are the ones that remain secure and certain that they can continue to trade. So I'm going to give you another extreme example in history. When World War II began, Germany tried to create a very daring supply chain to the other side of the world. Germany knew that they would no longer be able to import crops from traditional origin markets like Canada, Australia, or the US. Russia could backflip and switch allegiances like it did in World War I, and Germany wouldn't be able to import food from there. Eventually, it knew that its food stockpiles would run low. So what was the only option left? It went to South America. So Germany attempted to construct a food supply chain from South America to continental Europe during wartime. It took over French colonies in North Africa. It created a refueling spot in Dakar and tried to create shipping lines all the way down to South America from Dakar. Now, fast forward 100 years, and the interesting thing is that if you're a large buyer of commodities, any large buyer, there's only so many places in the world that you can get sufficient volumes of grains, oilseeds, or basically any other food. And again, I'm not comparing the politics of then and now. What I'm showing is that just like there's laws of physics, there's also laws of commodity sourcing, right? So if you're a large importer, there's only so many places in the world to get food. On the left-hand side, you have where you can get soybeans and corn in the world, the two largest crops. You can either get it in South or North America. And if you're not getting it in North America, you have to go to South America. So from that sense, it hasn't changed much. And the interesting thing is, there's a lot of talk about the South and East China Sea. And when you look at all the volatility in that region, you look at it from a food security lens, you understand why the South and East China Sea is actually so critical from a trade perspective, because of its connection between countries in Asia and the food supplies in South America. So 3 key takeaways. The first one is that geopolitical disruption could lead to lower for longer wheat prices. Secondly, the duration of price spikes may get shorter, and the need to ensure food security itself could lead to geopolitical disruption. That's pretty much it. I've got a podcast that comes out every single week. Just search Combank Agri Podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And my book is called War and Wheat, Navigating Markets During Global Conflict. You can find me on Twitter and on LinkedIn. And I'll stop there.
Thanks a lot, Dennis. It was pleasure hearing all excellent analysis you have done. We are seeing a West Asian war already going, and even Ukraine, Russia, they are not finding peace.
Yeah.
How do you see it becoming more volatile going forward?
Yeah, look, if you watch the news right now, it obviously doesn't seem like there's any reduction in volatility. With the US-Iran war, everyone's watching to see what happens with the peace deal. But like we saw with Russia and Ukraine, there was constant talk of a peace deal in the beginning, and then nothing ever eventuated. So yeah, I think it's important to look at the actions of countries as opposed to just what's said in the news. And a lot of countries are focusing more on food security and fuel security as well. So diesel, for example. And yeah, I think the risk isn't even a broader conflict around the world. The risk is you have all these localized supply chain disruptions. And I think that the government of any importing country is going, okay, how do I make sure that I'm just a little less reliant on the rest of the world in case there's a supply chain disruption? I need a little bit of runway before I can find where else can I get my fuel, where else can I get my food? And that's where the world's sitting at the moment.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Dennis. I know, even with the challenges with your health, you have joined. It's a pleasure to have you. And thanks a lot. It was really very insightful presentation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me. Goodbye.
Goodbye. So this brings us to the end of this interesting first session of day 2 on wheat. We'll be having 2 more sessions today lined up. One would cover wheat and rice in Europe, Middle East, and Africa at 9 a.m. GMT or 2:30 p.m. India time. We are also having the third session. This is also about wheat and rice, but this time in Americas, that is South and North America, at 9 a.m. New York time or 6:30 p.m. India time. I know, it is a long day for all of you, but in case you get time, do join in. And these 2 sessions, upcoming sessions, are also going to be great. We follow today's session tomorrow by talking about rice with the Asian context in the first session, followed by something which all CEO would love to see, the CEO's perspective on AgriTrade in current scenario. That is CEO's Corner, and then Egg Tech and Egg Logistic tomorrow as a third session. After that, we'll be talking about oil seeds on the 4th day. 5th day would be pulses, and the 6th day we'll cover sugar and softs. Looking forward to having an exciting week with all of you. Thanks a lot for joining. Signing off. Looking forward to see you again in our next session today at 9 a.m. GMT or 2:30 p.m. India time. Thank you.